And it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Huckabee. Mike Huckabee is the host of the TV show Huckabee on TBN each weekend and is a Fox News contributor, New York Times bestselling author of 14 books, and a highly sought-after public speaker. He was the 44th governor of Arkansas from 1996 until 2007, at a time when our state, as Sharon said, was solid blue. Governor Huckabee is one of the longest-serving governors in our state's history. He left a legacy of tax cuts, job creation, the reconstruction of our road system, K through 16 education reform, and a nationally recognized and duplicated health initiative that focused on prevention. In 2008 and 2016, he ran for President of the United States, finishing second in the Republican primary in 2008. Fun fact about the governor, he's an avid musician since age 11, a bass player, and often joins guest artists on his weekly television show, having played with Willie Nelson, Leonard Skinner, Toby Keith, the late George Jones, and many others. His hobbies include hunting, fishing, and music. He was named one of the 25 most influential people for conservation by Outdoor Life magazine and was named Man of the Year by the American Sport Fishing Association in 1997. Now, a personal side note, my first time meeting Governor Huckabee was at our state capitol when my children were attending a mock legislative session called Teen Pack. My son, John Mark, was probably 8 at the time, and he had written the governor to ask if he could meet with him while he was at the Capitol. To my surprise, a staff member called me to set up the meeting. John Mark included his sisters and a friend in the meeting with the governor. I expected the meeting to be short, hello, a snap of the picture, snap of the camera, but instead it was a personal meeting where he and John Mark talked about fishing and hunting. As a typical Arkansan boy, this was speaking John Mark's love language. This interaction made a lasting positive impact. But with all the wonderful accomplishments of Governor Huckabee, he will forever be known as Governor Sarah Sanders' father. And as a parent, I know that this is the most beloved title. His daughter Sarah became the first female governor of our state, and they are the first ever father and daughter to ever win the same gubernatorial race. I'm grateful for Governor Huckabee. I appreciate his friendship to the Republican women. Welcome, Governor Huckabee.
Julie, thank you very much. What a very nice introduction. And, one of the reasons probably that I had that extended meeting with your son is because his name is John Mark, which is also the name of my oldest son, John Mark. And I'm sure that intrigued me. But I was just so afraid you were going to say, yes, I first met Governor Huckabee when he came and spoke at my school. I was in the second grade. And then I would think, my gosh, I know I'm old, but have I gotten that old? But that happens to me all the time. People come up and say, do you remember me? And I'll say, I don't know. Help me out. Where did I meet you? And they're holding children in their arms and they tell me that I spoke at their kindergarten or their elementary school back when I was governor. And I'm thinking, yeah, I really don't. So there you go. But Julie, what a pleasure to join you and Sharon and Catherine and all the wonderful people of the National Federation of Republican Women. Let me begin by saying the reason I enjoyed your introduction is because it's, quite frankly, a lot more extensive than what I'm normally getting these days. Typically, when I go to speak somewhere now, instead of all of my biographical information, here's how I get introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sarah's dad. And that's it. So that is my new moniker, to the point that I went to some place to speak. I think it was in Pennsylvania, and somebody came up and handed me a T-shirt, and it simply said on the front, Sarah's dad. So that's how I am now pretty much, I guess, identified. But let me say how proud I am of her. She is doing, in my opinion, a phenomenal job. But you have to understand, I'm not objective. I'm her dad. So I tell people I'm as objective about her as the New York Times is about Donald Trump. So just keep that all in mind as I speak about my daughter. But I am proud of the job she's doing, the convictions that she has. More than anything, I'm proud of the fact that she has embraced the Christian and patriotic values that I really believe we need in our country. And she's unapologetic about that. And whether she was governor or not, she's raising her children in a way that gives me great joy as now the grandfather of her 3 and 4 others from my middle son. And it just is a terrific experience to look and see the baton being passed, and the person running the next leg running faster than I ever could. So for that, I'm extraordinarily grateful. Let me also express deep appreciation to all of you who work in the Federation of Republican Women. I'm not saying this just because I'm speaking to you. I've said it when I've spoken to every Republican group that I'm given the opportunity to. But if you really want to get something done, get the Republican women in on it. And quite frankly, I can tell you in my own political career, which started 32 years ago, I would never have been elected to anything, absolutely nothing, had it not been for the extraordinary work of Republican women in our great state of Arkansas. And I go back and I think about some of the incredible ladies, the Phyllis Kincannons and Doris Holke, who lived up in Northwest Arkansas. I just go Prissy Hickerson and Texarkana. I start thinking about these ladies that, I mean, they were the ones who put their shoulder to the wheel. And if you needed something done, they would be the ones up there late at night at the campaign headquarters, licking envelopes back in the days when we actually did things physically instead of everything being electronic, walking the streets and doing the things that were necessary to put up signs. And the election that I first won, which was lieutenant governor, I lost my first race for U.S. Senate. But in 1993, I was elected lieutenant governor in Arkansas, only the 4th Republican elected in 150 years in that state to a statewide office. And no one thought it was a race that could be won. It was a special election because Bill Clinton had been elected president. The lieutenant governor became governor, open seat for the lieutenant governor's spot. I had just finished a Senate race. I'd finished a statewide campaign. Asa Hutchinson, who later would become governor, was our party chair. And he came to me and he said, "Would you run for lieutenant governor? We need a candidate." Now, I don't think he thought I could win. He just said, "Hey, we need a warm body, somebody with a pulse, somebody who will take one for the team and go out there and get slaughtered for us. And we'll come pick up your remains after the election." And, I really, at that time, I was exhausted from a long race, but I thought, I kind of owe it to the people who worked so hard for me. So, okay, I'll get in there and do it. Lo and behold, largely because of Republican women, I won that race that nobody thought was winnable against Bill Clinton's hand-picked candidate for the race, where all of the money, about 20 times what I could raise, was raised right out of the basement of the White House. And that's not an apocryphal story. It really did go down that way. But the week before the election, I got a phone call from Clarksville, Arkansas, and somebody said, "I think you're going to win." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, I just went by Walmart, and Ada Mills, who is one of the most wonderful, storied leaders of Arkansas's Republican Party, she's gone from us for many years now, but they said, I just went by Walmart and I saw Ada Mills out in the July heat with her big straw sun hat, and she's across the street from Walmart, hammering in one of your yard signs in the hard earth across the street. And if somebody is working for you that hard in 100-degree heat, I can't help but believe we may just win this thing." And sure enough, because of wonderful people like Ada and so many others, and I'm hesitant to start naming names because I'd go all over the state and all the parts of Arkansas, north, south, east, and west, and think of the people that literally bring a tear to my eye when I think about what they did to help me get elected, not once, but repeatedly, and to help make changes in Arkansas. They're the heroes. I got the spotlight, but I'm going to tell you something. I literally will always stand in the shadow of these great, great workers who did the hard work and the heavy lifting to get us elected. So I want to begin just by saying thank you. And please never underestimate the power that you have as Republican women. Men, maybe they come to a fish fry, they might even write a check. But quite frankly, my experience is they don't do the work. And I just have to be honest and admit it. If you want it done, you call on the Republican women, and they're the ones that show up in those red jackets and red T-shirts. And by gosh, you got an army when they show up. And thank you. So it means a lot. And, I'm not sure, Catherine, you or Julie might kind of give me a little instruction on if you want me to make a few remarks or take questions from all of the conference attendees. I'm yours for the next little bit. So you tell me where to go from here.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, Governor, we'd love some remarks. And then we did have some questions that were submitted. We don't have time to ask you all of them, but we have a few to ask you once you're done with your remarks, if that's all right.
Sure. Well, let me kind of expand upon what I was just saying about the value of the Republican women. But let me also say that one of the reasons Republican women are strong is because so many are mothers, and they care passionately about what kind of country their children are going to grow up in. And for many of us now, it's what kind of country will our grandchildren grow up in? I've got 7 of them. Many of you have grandchildren. Looking kind of on the screen, I can see that some of you probably have grandchildren, whether you want to admit it or not. Yes, you're old enough. I see it. Others of you, however, are not old enough to have grandchildren, but maybe children or nieces and nephews if you don't have children. And the point is, you look at our culture and the things that are taking place, and you scratch your head and say, what happened? What happened? And quite frankly, what happened is that the battleground of our culture moved from being a battle between the Democrats and Republicans and the left and the right and the conservatives and the liberals. And now it truly is a battle between good and evil. And I'm not going to try to pretend that the Republicans are always the good guys and Democrats are the bad guys. I would tell you, it's transcended beyond that. There's some really decent Democrats that I've known through the years and have worked with, especially when I first got into office, because Arkansas, as has been mentioned by Julie, was such a hardcore blue state. And the first year I was governor, my legislative makeup that I had to work with was 89 Democrats and 11 Republicans in the House. In the Senate, it was 31 Democrats and 4 Republicans. So now when I look at what my daughter inherited when she gets sworn into office, and it's a supermajority Republican in both the House and the Senate, and every single constitutional officer is now Republican, when I was the only one in the Capitol, and people wouldn't even ride an elevator with me. And I'm not making that up. They would get off an elevator if I got on it. And it was some brutal times because nobody really wanted me there, and I was the interloper. But patience, perseverance, and quite frankly, good policy that the people of Arkansas could see improve their lives, help people to understand that Republicans weren't the worst thing that could happen to the state. It was keeping the status quo. It was just continuing to elect the good old boys and seeking to preserve the best of who we are as Republicans, which means we really believe that when people work really hard for their paycheck, they ought to keep more of it, and the government should take less of it. We're the people who believe that every life from the moment of conception is a precious gift from Almighty God and deserves to be protected and preserved, because that's an innocent life. And that life can't speak for himself or herself. We have to be there to protect and to provide that equal protection under the law guaranteed in the 5th and 14th Amendments. We're the people who believe the best government is the most local government, because it's the closest to the people who are being governed and therefore more accountable. And so we want less power concentrated in Washington and more power concentrated in our states and our communities and counties, where people can hold their elected officials accountable. We're the party who believe in traditional values without apology. It doesn't mean that we think everybody is wrong and other people's opinions don't matter or shouldn't be considered, but we just believe that patriotism is a virtue, that loving our country, saluting our flag, honoring those who have served us in uniform and being grateful for their service, and even weeping when we think about them, that those are things that are good things, and they make us a strong nation. And we don't apologize for even saying unapologetically, we believe we should put America first, because nobody else is going to. I don't expect the French or the British or the Italians, or certainly not the Chinese or the Russians, to worry about how well America is going to do. So that's our job. And we want to have the strongest country on earth for our children, grandchildren, and quite frankly, for being a beacon of freedom to the rest of the world. So I've grown up in that kind of environment. And I grew up in a county where we used to say there were only 7 Republicans that lived in Hempstead County in the southwest corner of the state where I grew up. And those 7, all of them had moved in from somewhere, or as they said down there, they'd been messed with, because nobody wanted to be a Republican in those days. I became a Republican as a teenager, which was really weird because that put me in an odd place in my own community and even amidst my own family. And I've often said, I wasn't sure that my own family voted for me until I got elected to something, and then they figured they might as well be on the winning team. I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but quite frankly, it was tough sailing. But the reason I became a Republican as a teenager was because I worked for one of those 7 Republicans in Hempstead County at the local radio station. And his name was Haskell Jones. His dear wife, Verlaine, is in her 90s. She's still alive. I spoke at Haskell's funeral back when I was governor. That's been 20-something years ago. And he had an influence on me. And here's what he really mentored me in, that you're blessed to be living in America. Get on your knees every night and thank God you're an American, because by the grace of God, you live in the greatest country on earth. But with that great gift comes an extraordinary responsibility. And it's not just to do for yourself. It is to love the country and to serve others in your community. And he had the most extraordinary sense of servanthood toward the community. And quite frankly, I grew up thinking, well, everybody's like that. Well, I found out they weren't. But his patriotism, his sense of pride in America rubbed off on me in a profound way. And I thought, if that's a Republican, that's what I want to be. And so my early days in politics, I was the Richard Nixon youth chairman in '72 for South Arkansas. So I kind of go back a ways. Jonathan Barnett, who many of you know, he's national committeeman for the state of Arkansas and a very dear friend. He and I met at Arkansas Boys State. He was elected Boys Nation senator. I was elected governor of Boys State. Our lifelong friendship was forged when we were both all of 16 years old. And we have been lifelong friends and brothers since then. And he was one of those other Republicans. But I will say he was in Northwest Arkansas, where it was a little easier back then to be Republican. So I've kidded him. I said, John, you need to come down to South Arkansas and to see just how few of us there are. I wanted to say all that because there's an old saying, I know you've heard it, that if you ever see a turtle on a fence post, just be assured of one thing. He did not get there by himself. And I've always been reminded that most of us who get elected, all of us who get elected, are like turtles on a fence post. None of us got there by ourselves. Our families were with us. Our friends were with us. But most importantly, a whole lot of people who didn't really even know us volunteered for our campaigns, did the hard work, did the things that make it possible to get elected. And it is on their shoulders that we ride down the street in victory. It is not just our own doings. So I pray that you never underestimate the work that you do and the importance of it. But to kind of close that loop, I started by saying that the world we're living in today is no longer the left, the right, the liberal, the conservative, the Democrat, the Republican. It really is the evil versus the good. And I say that with a sense of sadness, because I like a two-party system. I like the fact that there are ideas that bounce off each other and make us all better. But there's nothing to make us better when people believe that you can take a 6-year-old child and give him or her the ability to just one day show up and imagine himself or herself to be something that God didn't make them to be. We don't let kids drive, enter contracts, get married, buy booze or cigarettes. We don't let them get tattoos when they're 6 years old. But we've got otherwise educated adults who are telling us that it's okay for a child that young to read pornography at school, or to be a biological boy but dress as a girl, and pretend to be a girl, or even worse, to pretend to be an animal and be expected to be called a furry. This is not normal. And we've got to be clear that we're not trying to make a political issue, but we're trying to salvage the moral integrity of our country. And we realize that the ultimate battle in this nation, excuse me, is not just political or economic or socio-economic. It really is spiritual. And we should never forget that, and pray and hope that the good people of America will rise up and be bold, because this is no time to shrink and to pretend that everything is okay, because it isn't okay. And that's why I appreciate people who have what I would consider to be biblical convictions. People, they may be Jewish, they may be even Muslim, but I'm seeing an incredible thing happening in this country where people of faiths that maybe I don't embrace personally, but they're people whose own faith say, this is not right to live in this world in which we basically have adopted the time of the judges where everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And I just saw a news story this morning where an interfaith group up in the Northeast, including Muslims, people of Jewish faith, Christians, all banding together as moms and dads to tell their local schools, we are not going to tolerate having this insanity inflicted upon our children. We're just not. And that to me is the most optimistic sign that I'm seeing, even more optimistic than just electing someone to a public office and hope they will do better for us. But I always believe that ultimately we hold people accountable who do get elected, and we remind them why we voted for them and why we worked for them and what we expect of them. We don't expect perfection. We don't even expect we'll agree with them all the time. But we expect that they take a stand for what's right and pay the price when that's what's required. We're coming into an election cycle that will be an incredibly valuable one. I don't have to tell you that it's going to be an extraordinary environment. I cannot believe the Democrat Party has disintegrated to a point in its political leadership where their choices are Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, neither one of whom can put a sentence together. Joe Biden can't even get off the stage without somebody coming and taking him by the arm and showing him which way to go. It's inconceivable to me that the American people would say, yep, that's our leader. We want to follow him. Heck, he has to follow somebody else just to get up and down the staircase of Air Force One. So the nonsense that somehow he's the best we've got, it just stuns me. I do think before it's over, he won't be the nominee. I could be wrong, but I just think that there will be enough pressure within the party. They'll find a way to say, thanks for your service, Joe. Don't know what you did in 60 years in public office other than get a check and enrich yourself with the Chinese. But by golly, enjoy the rest of your time on the beaches of Delaware. I don't know where that goes from there, but I just can't imagine that they end up saying that's the best they've got. On our side, and I will tell you, just by matter of full disclosure, I've endorsed Trump. I know a lot of people have other candidates they pick, and I totally respect that. I want to be very clear. I will support the Republican nominee, whoever he or she may be, because I believe that that's what good Republicans do. We're team players, and I'll be a team player. And I think that all the candidates should also agree to that. I think that's important, because to enjoy the resources of the party, but not support the person that the party chooses to be our leader, I don't understand how we can reconcile that. So I just want to say, I think we've got some terrific candidates in our lineup, and any one of them getting the nomination, I would support every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I feel like that when I speak to Republican women, I certainly will be, and I am speaking to people who share that sentiment. So with that, let me pause, and I'll let you guys throw some questions at me, and we'll see where it goes.
So first, you possess a knack for expressive turns of phrase. For example, last week you stated that the subservient White House press gives Biden's shoes a tongue bath each morning. That is a fantastic line, but it also highlights a serious problem. Without a free, independent press, one willing to question authority, democracy suffocates. What can be done to revive smart, factual, objective journalism?
Catherine, I think it's important that we do our best to challenge the press in their bias. And one way to do it is simply to shame them. There's no other way. The two natural attributes that a good journalist have would be curiosity and cynicism. Curiosity to seek out whatever the truth is, wherever it may lead them, even if it leads them toward uncovering uncomfortable things about a side that they personally agree with. That curiosity is fundamental to good journalism. And the second thing is cynicism. Never accept that somebody is telling you the truth just because they said it's the truth. We have people sitting in the White House press briefing every day. They have no curiosity. They don't ask questions. If they do, then they show their complete lack of integrity when they're given just an answer that makes no sense. And they just sit there and nod their head and say, yep. So we need the curiosity and the cynicism. And when we don't get it, I think we ought to ridicule those in the press and make it as uncomfortable as we possibly can for them. And point out that we respect the press. We believe in the First Amendment. We not just are people who believe in it, we believe it is critical, essential, crucial to the furthering of our great republic. But if people don't practice real journalism and all they are is just unvarnished advocates for one side against the other, then they have become what President Trump got in so much trouble for saying. They are the enemy of the people. And the reason they become the enemy of the people, not all, but many of them have, is because they're failing to do the one thing that they and they alone can do. And that's give us an objective understanding of what the facts are, and then let us decide what we think about those facts.
Governor Huckabee, I love that you represent the truth so much in everything that you say, excuse me. And I have your next question. So Arkansas is home to many formidable Republican women, just like you've said, and we've all said. Recently, Arkansas's incredible governor appointed a strong, well-qualified conservative to the state Supreme Court. Simultaneously, the U.S. Supreme Court issued some notable rulings. Naturally, the leftists have thrown a tantrum. What's your view of pundits who, when they disagree with a ruling, question the court's legitimacy and/or accuse them of political partisan?
Well, it's a dangerous thing when people don't get their way, and instead of engaging in thoughtful debate and being specific about the points of disagreement, they simply attack the institution that spoke something that they didn't agree with. That's not healthy. You know, I do Twitter mostly as a form of entertainment. I don't take it seriously, and I'll say things that maybe I think's funny. Maybe nobody else does, but I'm doing it to amuse myself, if you will, just to have some fun. And then people will just unleash this vitriol. And I find it, I know they probably think that I'm cowering over in the corner, curled up in a fetal position because they've attacked me. And what they don't understand is I'm laughing my head off, and I'm thinking, you poor things, you have no argument. You have nothing to bring to the table other than your own loud voice, but you're not saying anything. If you want to engage me in a discussion or a debate, bring it. But just to say that, oh, I didn't get my way, or you disagree with me, therefore you're an idiot. Well, gee, my wife tells me that every day, so that's nothing new. Give me something I don't know. I just feel that one of the ways that we have to counter this, and I'm going to go back to a little bit of what I said with the press, is ridicule. Ridicule may be the best weapon we have, because nothing upsets the people on the far left more than simply being ridiculed. And by ridicule, I don't mean just poking undue fun. I'm saying point out the insanity of what they're saying. For example, if someone says, I'm triggered by the presence of a conservative, you know, I ridicule them and say, are you serious? You're in college, you're going to an Ivy League school like Yale, and you're asking that university that is charging your parents $90,000 a year, you're asking them to provide you a little room where you can go pet a puppy, eat a popsicle, and mold some Play-Doh because somehow somebody hurt your feelings. Kiddo, you don't need to be in Yale. You need to go home, start over in kindergarten, and learn the basic lessons of the sandbox. And when you can grow up, then you can become an adult, get in an adult world, and join the rest of us. I think we've so long tried to be polite and kind and sweet and say, well, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But these people are not just hurting feelings. These people are hurting our country. They're hurting our future. They're destroying what America is supposed to be. And that's a place where people are free to disagree, free to even say stupid things. We allow that. We welcome it. And then we're free to reject it and free to say, yeah, thanks for sharing your idea. We don't embrace it. In fact, we think it's crazy. We're free to do that. We shouldn't have the government telling Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube what we can and can't hear because somebody in government is threatened that a person like any one of us might have an idea different than theirs.
Governor, 2 years ago, my federation here in South Dakota was honored when a great American, Dr. Ben Carson, addressed our state convention. You've called his story, and I quote, an epic reminder that where one starts in life doesn't determine where one stops. The world's greatest pediatric neurosurgeon wasn't limited by his poverty, skin color, or zip code. Sir, I couldn't agree more. Do you believe America is moving toward meritocracy, realizing Dr. King's dream of judging individuals not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character?
Catherine, I think we are moving in that direction only if Republicans are able to be the leaders. And again, I don't mean to make that a partisan statement, but the Democrats have abdicated that sense of meritocracy, and they once embraced it. So let's be fair. The John F. Kennedys of the world, who looked at this country and said, we're going to send a man to the moon in the next decade, when that seemed unattainable, impossible. And he said, we're going to send him to the moon and bring him back. And I lived through that era. And I remember in July of 1969, watching Neil Armstrong put his feet on the surface of the moon and exclaim, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. John F. Kennedy didn't live to see that, but I did. And I never forgot the kind of bold leadership that we had from people in both parties that believed that America could do anything. And then we started electing people that thought America was a second-rate nation, that it shouldn't be first, that we were an evil nation, a racist nation, that we were harsh to others. That's not who we are. Sure, we got flaws and mistakes, but we need to celebrate what this country is about. Ben Carson, to me, is one of the great examples of a person who overcame extraordinary odds. And I love his story. And of those of you who have never really gotten the full scope of his story, one of the great lessons that Ben taught all of us, his mother, who was a single mom raising two boys, she worked cleaning houses for wealthy people. And cleaning houses for wealthy people, she always looked around and she said, you know what's different about the people whose houses I clean and most people's homes who live in the projects, because they lived in a housing project. She said, the wealthy people, they have a lot of books. Everywhere there are books. She went home and she told her boys, we're going to turn the TV off and you boys are going to read books. Now, I want you to understand, she had little boys who were 7, 8 years old. And she told them, instead of sitting around watching TV, I'm going to have you read books. Ben Carson will tell you that it was one of the transformational things in his life. He was not particularly a good student. In fact, he was often dubbed a failure and somebody who couldn't make it. I think it's fair to say he turned out pretty well, but he did it not because his skin was black and not because somebody gave him an artificial boost. He did it because he worked harder than the other kids to be the best there was, the best there is. That's what we ought to be teaching every kid, whether they live in the projects or whether they live in the nicest home in town. I myself came out of virtual poverty. I'm the first male in my entire family lineage to even graduate high school, much less go to college. So I understand what it's like to grow up where you didn't have the nice clothes and didn't take vacations. And heck, we didn't even have air conditioning. And in Arkansas in the summertime, to not have air conditioning, pretty brutal. But that's the world I came from. I was catching chickens at 8 and 9 years old to get enough money to buy a baseball and BBs for my BB gun because my parents didn't have money to give me the stuff I wanted. I come out of those chicken houses having worked all night from 10 in the evening till 6 the next morning. Bunch of us kids, we were basically slave labor back in the 60s because there was no OSHA. Nobody was looking out for us. We were just having to scrap and get some, a few dimes and dollars to get by. But I'd come out of those chicken houses bone tired, smelling so bad, our mothers would hose us off in the yard before she'd even let us go in and take a bath. And here's the question I would ask myself every time I come out of those chicken houses, which is a horrible job. What do I have to do so I don't have to do this the rest of my life? And I'd always hear the same answer: work hard, get a good education, and treat people well. And so at a young age, I decided I will work hard, I will get a good education, and I will treat people well because I do not want to spend the rest of my life catching these nasty chickens. And it's a great motivator. I don't resent the life I grew up with. I don't have any feeling that I was underprivileged or that somehow it wasn't fair. My parents never allowed me to say it wasn't fair that other kids had stuff I didn't. They said, son, this is America, and it's up to you to live the life you choose to live. And you may have to work a little harder. Nobody will be there to open a door for you and make it easy. And they were right about that. But my goodness, a kid that grew up never thinking he'd see a governor in person, not only became one, but became the father of one. That's why I love this country. Where else on earth, where else can a person live the life that an American has the privilege of living? Again, may not be easy, but it's possible.
Do you feel like the woke corporations will learn anything from the huge losses suffered by Target or Bud Light?
Great question. Well, if they don't, they're really stupid. And who I blame are their board of directors. The purpose of a corporation is to make money for the shareholders. That's the purpose. And when they start losing money, their boards have a fiduciary responsibility to demand course correction. And if these boards don't do that, every one of them ought to be dismissed for the shareholders. And people ought to dump their stock and say, we're not going to invest in a company that's this stupid, that insults your customers. I think what has happened to three companies in particular, you mentioned two of them, Bud Light, the other one being Target, and the third one being Disney. Disney is in free fall, and they deserve it. They've earned, by their dumb decisions to keep putting movies out that are insulting to families and dangerous to children, and pretending that they're carrying on the legacy of Walt Disney, who would be aghast at what has happened to the company he created. So their amusement park numbers are down. Their movies have been flops. The latest several movies have lost nearly $1 billion from their production costs. You can't lose that kind of money and say, we're running a great ship here. You just can't. I think Target's stupidity in insulting a lot of their customers, particularly families with children. And then, of course, Bud Light, the ultimate insult to the very people that were using their product, and basically saying, yeah, you are a bunch of fratty rednecks, and we're really trying to go after a more sophisticated group of people. Well, the sophisticates didn't want them, and they insulted all of the people that were their core base. So now they've dropped 27% of market share, and I don't think it's coming back. I think that their way they've handled it, instead of ever coming out and apologizing and saying, boy, we really screwed that up, they just keep going forward with even dumber statements to try to defend themselves. So I can't see that brand having much of a future.
Well, one final question, Governor, and then I know you've got to go. And that is, for a couple of years, I actually lived in Bentonville, and I tell you, it is a beautiful area over there. But originally, I'm from Texas. And so I understand a good tamale, and I know that you're a tamale fan too. And so this is a very important question to me. I want to know if you agree with me that delicious tamales should be enjoyed year-round, or do you agree with my husband who says that they should only be eaten in December?
Your husband needs some serious help. He is so wrong. If you don't eat tamales year round, you're missing one of the great joys of life. And Catherine, let me tell you, I go hunting in South Texas every year. I've got a friend who has a ranch, and he lets me go, and I deer hunt. And I take some of the deer that he needs to cull out of his herd. Okay, so I don't go for his trophy bucks. I don't shoot for the wall. I'm shooting for the freezer. And I fill my freezer every year with some wonderful venison. I get it processed down in Kingsville because it's near where I hunt. And I get about half of the deer meat made into the best tamales one can ever have. And so that's what I do with a lot of my deer meat, is make tamales out of it. And then I enjoy those tamales, and I top it with chili that I personally make with the venison. And I can't imagine not eating that year round. I mean, it's just, tell your husband, where's he from anyway? Is he from Connecticut or somewhere?
He's from Texas also.
Well, he ought to know better. He should know better. That
Thank
tamales
you.
are a treat forever. And I can't imagine, but tell him he's wrong. You're right. And I'm sure you tell him that all the time, but you should tell him that I agree with you on that. By the way, can I give you a quick tamale story that has great political implications? In 1976, I was in graduate school in Texas, living in Fort Worth. And Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter were running for the presidency. And a lot of people may not realize that it was a tamale that determined the outcome of that election. And I'm not making this up. You can Google it, read the story, but I remember it very well because it was everywhere on the Texas news. Gerald Ford went to San Antonio the weekend before the Tuesday election. And when he got there, he was handed a tamale. And Gerald Ford, being from Michigan and not really understanding the power of a tamale, especially in San Antonio, sought to eat the tamale with the shuck still on it. And that video of Gerald Ford eating a tamale with the shuck still on it reverberated throughout all of Texas, with people saying, I can't vote for him. Off the tamale before you eat it. Texas was crucial to winning the presidency that year. 1976, if you didn't win Texas, you couldn't win the White House. And who won Texas probably would win. This was when Texas was a more purple state, maybe even leaning a little bit blue. And that decision, I'm convinced, cost Gerald Ford the White House, because Jimmy Carter ended up winning Texas in 76. He won the White House. And I'll always believe that a tamale was to blame. So there's your political tamale story of the day.
Well, thank you, Governor. I tell you, my day has already been made. Sharon, Julie, would y'all like to say goodbye as well? But thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Governor Huckabee.
Thank you. Great to be with you. And thanks again for what you do. God bless you, and keep doing it. Don't grow weary in well-doing, because we need you.